Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On the Tuesday after Memorial Day, I'm joined by Senator Tom Cotton, whom the great mentioner got a hold of over the weekend. Senator Cotton, so you're on the short list for vice president. Have you begun to be vetted yet?
Good morning, Hugh. I hope you and all your listeners had a restful and reflective Memorial Day weekend and all the great Americans who gave the last full measure of devotion to defend our freedoms. Hugh, I suspect that only Donald Trump knows who is on his short list. He has a lot of choices. I have no doubt would be good for him, and that he'll make that choice when the time is right for him.
Did anybody ask for your tax returns yet?
They have not. They're pretty meager, though.
Okay, so if they haven't asked for your tax returns, we're not down to short strokes. Senator, I've talked to Byron York, Brett Baer, and I've given people my own opinion. I have two questions about the Trump trial. I know it's a charade. I know it's a miscarriage of justice, and I know that the trial judge ought to be called Smales, not Merchan. Do you think Donald Trump will be acquitted, convicted, or a hung jury?
Well, President Trump obviously should be acquitted. If this judge wants to save any shred of credibility and reputation, he would direct a verdict of not guilty before sending this case to the court or to the jury. I suspect he won't, because he's revealed himself to be a partisan at every turn, committing reversible error after reversible error by, for instance, excluding testimony that President Trump wanted to put on and refusing, still to this day, apparently, in the jury instructions soon to be issued, to require the prosecution to even identify what the underlying crime Donald Trump supposedly intended to cover up with the supposed bookkeeping mistakes. That's how unfair this trial is, Hugh, is that today Donald Trump's lawyers are supposed to begin closing arguments for crimes that have not yet been identified.
The judge had promised jury instructions by Thursday night, and they had not yet been published this morning. So I don't know what's in them. I don't expect much. I do have a second follow-up question, though. Do you have any hearings this week in the Judiciary Committee?
No, Hugh. The Senate is not in session this week. But to your point about the judge's timing, that's another example of how every single decision has put a thumb on the scale for Alvin Bragg's sham prosecution. Last Monday, you had Michael Cohen yet again melting down on the stand, acknowledging he had stole tens of thousands of dollars from the Trump organization. The previous week, the judge had told the lawyers to be ready for closing arguments as early as Tuesday, a week ago today. After Michael Cohen melted down once again, the only thing that Alvin Bragg is resting his case on, the judge all of a sudden said, you know what, let's wait until next Tuesday to do closing arguments. The only credible explanation is that he wanted to put as much distance between the jury's deliberations and Michael Cohen's disastrous testimony to, again, put a thumb on the scale for Alvin Bragg's sham prosecution.
I agree with that. And then he followed up by hectoring Costello, who is not allowed to testify as to what he knows. Longtime experience, Southern District of New York prosecutor and defense attorney. He also, Merchan's list of reversible error is as long as my arm. What I wanted to ask you is, the next time a judicial nominee by Joe Biden comes before the Judiciary Committee, will you ask them for their opinion on Judge Merchan's conduct of this trial?
I think that'd be a very interesting question and answer session to have. I suspect they'll hide behind the ruse that they can't comment on another judge's rulings because they might themselves be a judge. The real answer is they don't want to have to defend his outrageous, erroneous mistakes time and time again that show him, as his contribution to Joe Biden in 2020 showed him, to be a partisan.
You've been on judiciary how many years now, Senator?
Nearly 4 years now. So
it's got to be 400 judges, right?
It's been a lot, Hugh. I don't think it's been quite 400, but it's certainly been a lot. They're filling these courts with a bunch of rabid partisans and, frankly, unqualified political hacks in many cases.
But do you remember any of them making contributions to presidential campaigns?
Not as sitting judges, Hugh. I mean, some of them come in as private lawyers, and of course, as private lawyers, they're entitled to their political opinions and to make contributions to candidates. Republican judicial nominees do that as well. But among those who are sitting judges, either you say federal magistrate judges or state court judges, I can't recall any making political contributions as a judge. Now, maybe it's possible one or two slip by and weren't noticed, or I can't recall them at the moment. But again, no sitting judge anywhere should be making political contributions to anyone. That's part of what happens when you become a judge. Yeah, people are interested in politics and government, and they want to become a judge, and they give contributions to candidates and parties of their choice. But once you put on the black robes, you're supposed to take off the red or the blue jersey. Judge Merchant in New York has not done that. He gave money to Joe Biden as a sitting judge, and then he took the case against Joe Biden's number one political opponent being prosecuted by a senior Department of Justice lawyer that was dispatched from Washington to New York specifically to prosecute this case.
I may be the only person who is bothered by the $35 in contributions that the trial judge made. He made a $10 contribution to Joe Biden, or a $15 contribution to Joe Biden, and two $10 contributions to anti-Trump committees. Those are symbolic contributions. But if I recall correctly, and it's been a while since I looked at the Judicial Code of Conduct in California, California judges are not allowed to make contributions under the Judicial Code of Conduct, and they can only go to a political event if their spouse is the one who paid for the ticket. And I would see a judge occasionally at a political event in their capacity as spouse, but they never went solo because, of course, it gives away the game. And then you're not assured of the appearance of impartiality when you go in. Wouldn't you think that this judge ought to have recused himself, having made symbolic contributions?
There is no question, Hugh, that having made that contribution to Joe Biden's campaign against Donald Trump just 4 years ago, he should have never sat of his case. He should have immediately recused himself. And Hugh, again, as we've discussed in the past, the size of the contribution doesn't matter. In fact, the small size of it is even perhaps more telling.
It is
the way for Judge Merchan to signal to the Democratic machine in New York City and New York State and Chuck Schumer, I'm on the team. I'm a reliable Democratic partisan. If you have cases that you need a reliable Democratic judge on, send them my way. That's exactly what that contribution was designed to signal in 2020.
So I'm hoping, the reason I was hoping that you had nominees this week is so that you could ask them first, have you ever contributed to a campaign if they're a sitting judge, and then ask them if they intend to make contributions when they're on the bench. Because I think the answer would be no and no, and I can't do that, as you know. I just think that you'd find very few who would be unwilling to comment on trial judge Merchan's conduct, but you'd find a lot of them that would confirm what you and I are saying. Now, I want to go to whether or not, I've only been on one jury. Have you ever been on a jury, Senator?
I have never had the privilege of sitting on a jury.
Well, I have been on one, and it was a three-strike case, and it was crazy. I mean, just crazy. And one person would not vote to convict, spouse of a public defender, and just would not vote to convict. We had a mountain of evidence and would not vote to convict. I can't see one real juror holding up against Trump derangement syndrome infected zombies. I don't see how this goes his way. Do you?
Hugh, I wouldn't want to speculate on what the jury's going to do. I think it's probably never predictable what's happening inside a jury room. On the one hand, I can't imagine how any sensible, fair-minded person could see what's been put on trial in New York City and think that Donald Trump has committed any crime, much less this enhanced felony that Bragg has fraudulently charged him with. On the other hand, the judge has been such a partisan, has kept out so much evidence, I suspect is going to give them such a warped and biased jury instruction, they may take their cues from the judge. And you know how much influence a judge can have over the jury. So I just wouldn't hazard a guess of what the jury will do. I hope that all 12 of them immediately acquit him and only stick around for 30 minutes to get their free sandwiches and potato chips before they come back out after closing arguments.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, but I am not a hopeful person. Senator Cotton, we'll talk again next week, and someday when you get a judge in front of them, start asking about their contributions. I think you're going to find that most sitting judges will never have made one, but we will see. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you. I'm going to have